Welcome to episode 4 in my restorative gardening series. I'm so excited for today because I am going to be teaching you how to grow cucumbers. Now, if this is your first lesson, my name is Jordan and I founded a company called Mind and Soil in 2020 with the hope and intention of introducing 1 million individuals to gardening's mental health benefits. So not only am I hoping to help you grow beautiful vegetables and flowers and more, but also to do so in a way that brings you peacefulness and joy and restoration while you're out there. And so if you haven't had a chance yet to go and look at any of the previous lessons in this series, I really encourage you to do so because we've already touched on topics such as how to go about planning your garden, how to start seeds indoors, how to prep the soil for the season ahead, as well as individual growing guides on other crops such as broccoli, potatoes, and more. And with that being said, today I'm going to be focused solely on teaching you how to grow cucumbers. And I'm really excited about this one because this is one of those crops that I've been growing for many years now, and I've picked up a number of tips and tricks along the way to really help increase the overall yield that I'm getting from my cucumber plants. And so the way that I'm going to break this down is into 9 steps for growing cucumbers. And to get started with step number 1, that is to start your seeds indoors. And the reason why we do this is because we want to ensure that our cucumbers are growing in absolutely perfect conditions for the first 3 to 4 weeks of their lives. And most of the time, it's a little bit too cold when we would like to be starting them for us to actually be starting them outside. Therefore, we can start them indoors, let them grow for 3 to 4 weeks, and then transplant them into the garden. So to start your cucumber seeds, the first thing that you want to do is grab a 3-inch seed cell, and you're going to fill it up to the top with worm casting seedling mix or another form of a seedling mix. And once the seed cell is filled up, give it a couple of taps, move it around a little bit just to get the seedling mix nice and consolidated. After that, you're going to add 1 turkey base of water into the seedling mix. The reason why you're doing this is because we want to begin moistening that seedling mix because for the seeds to germinate, they need a warm and moist environment. So go through each one of your seed cells that you're starting and add 1 turkey base of water into it. Next, we're going to place 3 to 5 cucumber seeds into each one of the seed cells. And we start more than 1 seed in each one of these seed cells because that ensures that at least 1 will germinate in each seed cell, and therefore we can transplant each of those into the garden. So simply space your 3 to 5 seeds throughout that seed cell, and once you've done that, we're going to do a second round of watering. So now add another turkey base of water into each one of the seed cells. And again, we're doing this because we want to create moisture in this seed cell, in this environment for the seeds to be germinating and starting. Now, once we've done our second round of watering, the next thing that we want to do is add about 1 centimeter of worm casting seedling mix over top of these seeds. So we're going to cover them with about 1 centimeter worth of seedling mix. And this is going to give the seeds some nice medium to grow through, to be supported in as it begins to sprout through the surface. And so once they're covered, you're then going to add a third and final turkey base of water into each one of the seed cells so that now the seedling mix beneath the seeds is moist, the seeds themselves are moist, as well as that seedling mix up above them is also moist at this point. And so with that all complete, they now have the moisture that they need in order to germinate. The other thing that we need to make sure that they have is warmth. So now you're going to take your seeds and move them over to your seed starting station, and you want to ensure that this seed starting station is at least 70 Fahrenheit or 20 Celsius. And as mentioned at the beginning of this video, I have a full lesson on how to go about starting seeds indoors that goes into even greater detail across the board on how to go about being successful with starting your seeds indoors. I really encourage you to check that video out as well. So over the course of the next 7 to 10 days, your cucumber seeds are going to germinate and begin to grow. And as they do that, it's the perfect time for us to move on to step 2, which is to prep the soil. Now, cucumbers are huge eaters and drinkers, so we really want to make sure that we plant them into a soil that is really good from a moisture retention perspective. This is going to ensure that the plant has all of the moisture that it needs to grow really nice and big, and then develop those beautiful cucumbers a little bit later on in the season. And so if you've watched any of the previous videos in this series, you know that I'm a big fan of growing in a medium of 75% compost and 25% vermiculite. Cucumbers will absolutely love you for this blend. So to make it, all that you need to do is grab something like a wheelbarrow, and then take 3 parts compost and add that into the wheelbarrow. After that, add 1 part of vermiculite, and then go ahead and just blend that into a nice and consistent mixture. See, vermiculite is a clay particle that does an incredible job at retaining moisture, which is why we want to have that about 25% vermiculite in there. Now with your wheelbarrow of soil ready, the next thing that you want to do is choose an area that gets a lot of sun for your cucumbers to be planted. So when we take a look at my backyard, we can see that even right now, part of the backyard is still shaded by the house, but the back fence area is already getting sun. So that would be the area that I would be choosing to ultimately be putting my cucumbers into. So for yourself, make sure that you dedicate a really nice sunny spot for your cucumbers for them to grow to their fullest potential. And once you've found that spot, all that you need to do is take that wheelbarrow of soil, dump it into that area, flatten it out, and it is all prepped and ready for the cucumbers to be planted into it. And so while we were prepping the soil outside, over the course of the last couple of weeks, the cucumbers have started to grow. They're probably 3 to 4 weeks in, and that brings us to step 3, which is to do a hardening off process. And this is the process of introducing your cucumbers to the intensity and the variability of the outdoor garden to make sure that they are all set and able to thrive out there from day one. And so we want to introduce them to all of that intensity and variability in an incremental manner. So on day 1, you're going to take your cucumber seedlings and any other seedlings that you're getting ready to transplant and put them outside for 2 hours. And you want to place them into direct sunlight, let them experience all of the intensity of the sun, the outdoors, etc. But after 2 hours, you're then going to bring them back inside, place them underneath the grow lights, and allow them to stay there for the rest of the day and continue growing there. As you move into day 2, we're going to repeat the process, but we're going to increase it to 4 hours. So you bring them outside, you place them right in direct sun because we want to expose them to that intensity for 4 hours. And after 4 hours, you simply grab them, bring them back inside, place them underneath the grow lights where they'll continue to grow for the rest of that day. For day 3, we're going to increase that to 6 hours. So now you bring them outside and you're leaving them outside for 6 hours before bringing them back in. We're going to continue this process of increasing by 2 hours per day until we get to day 6. Now on day 6, at the end of the day, rather than bringing them inside, you're going to leave them outside. And the reason for this is because we want to expose them to the intensity of the coldest parts of the day to make sure that they're able to handle and tolerate it. So for day 6, we leave them outside overnight, which means day 7, we don't even need to bring them outside. They just hang out outside and we leave them outside there for a 7th day. And that concludes the 7-day hardening off process. Our cucumbers, they've survived all this. They are ready to be transplanted into the garden. Now, after day 7, they've stayed outside for 2 nights. They are hardened off. They are ready to be transplanted into the garden. Now, just 2 quick sub pieces on this. For cucumbers, I encourage you to wait on transplanting them until that average nighttime low is at least 10 Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit. So we want to make sure that it's nice and warm before we actually transplant them into the garden. If you don't have those temperatures yet, you can continue just to be either bringing them inside or leaving them outside on the slightly cooler temperatures until it warms up a little bit. We want to make sure that it's really nice and warm before we transplant them. And secondly is that if you want to see a full in-depth video on how I go about this hardening off process for all of my crops, which ones to be transplanting a little bit earlier, which ones to be transplanting a little bit later, then I really encourage you to check out the lesson that I did on hardening off a little bit earlier on in this series as I go into the topic in much greater detail. So just before we transplant our cucumber babies into their forever home in the garden, step number 4 is to set up an A-frame trellis. Now, I absolutely swear by this and absolutely love utilizing an A-frame trellis for growing cucumbers because it allows the plant to grow vertically and begin sprawling in every which direction. And that creates this huge canopy of leaves that basically act as solar panels to absorb energy from the sun that it can then put towards developing cucumbers all across the plant. So I'm a huge fan of utilizing an A-frame trellis. And if you want to see a full video guide on how to go about building an A-frame trellis, in season 1, episode 5, I actually go through it in a step-by-step manner. So I really encourage you to check out that video when you have a couple of minutes. Now, conversely, if you didn't want to build your own structure, there are tons of options online that you could purchase, have it shipped directly to your door, and you'll be able to place that into your garden immediately. And that's a really good option to go down if you're just looking for something quick and easy to get into your garden. So do whichever one works best for you. And once you have your A-frame trellis on hand, all that you need to do is place it into the garden where the cucumbers are going to be planted. And that brings us into step number 5, which is to transplant with worm castings and superfood. So as I mentioned earlier on in this video, cucumbers are huge eaters and drinkers. So we really want to make sure that they have all of the nutrients right in their root zone as we transplant them so they can put on tons of growth underneath that warm summer sun. And so to do so, the first thing that you want to do is to dig your transplant hole. And you're simply going to use something like a hori-hori knife to dig down about 4 to 5 inches to create that transplant hole. Once you've done that, you're going to add 1 handful of worm castings into the transplant hole, as well as 1 tablespoon of 444 organic fertilizer. With both of those in, you can give it a little massage, and then you're going to grab your cucumber seedling and you're going to pop it out of its seed cell, and you can gently loosen up the roots if it's starting to get a little bit root bound, and then simply place it into that transplant hole and then backfill with the surrounding soil that you just kind of shoveled up when you were creating that hole, and press it down so it's nice and compactly placed in there. Got nowhere to go, fall over, anything along those lines. Ensure it's nice and snug. After that, I like to also place 1 handful of worm castings and 1 tablespoon of 444 right around the base of the plant where it enters into the soil, and then scratch that into the top 1 inch of soil. This is going to ensure that we've got both worm castings and organic fertilizer right in that root zone as the cucumber begins to grow. And so by adding both the worm castings and the organic fertilizer into the transplant hole, this cucumber has all of the nutrients and microbial life that it needs to thrive and begin growing into a huge, beautiful plant over the course of the summer here. And that's ultimately going to yield tons and tons of cucumbers for you. So step 5 complete, we're on to step number 6, which is a very challenging one, and that is to remove the first flowers. So ultimately, these flowers, once pollinated, turn into the cucumber that we're looking to harvest. So in a lot of ways, we really want to be seeing flowers on our plants. So you might be wondering, like, why on earth would you be telling me to remove them? Well, the reason why is because right when we plant our cucumber into the ground, it's really small. And so if it starts to develop a cucumber right at this point, it doesn't have hardly any leaves, which again act as our solar panels to bring in energy from the sun. And so it might be able to produce 1 or 2 cucumbers, but the plant is really going to slow down and put all of its energy towards developing those first few fruit. However, if we remove the first flowers, then the plant redirects all of its energy rather from developing the cucumber to developing more foliage. And so as it creates more foliage, that is creating more and more solar panels all across the plant to be absorbing the sun's energy and putting that towards future fruit development. And so having a huge canopy of foliage or leaves on your cucumber plants is going to result in getting more cucumbers over the course of the season. And so to remove those flowers, all that you need to do is simply find them on your plant and then go ahead and just simply pinch them off, or you could use pruning shears to remove them. And I encourage you to do this until the plant has probably 12 to 16 leaves on it. So it will be for the first 3 to 4 weeks that you're going to be removing these flowers. But trust me, you're going to end up being rewarded for it in the long run. And if you don't trust me, then what I would encourage you to do is run a little experiment around this. Take a couple of your cucumber plants and leave all of the flowers on them. Allow them to just grow with those flowers, begin developing cucumbers, and you'll even get to probably enjoy some early cucumber harvest. But then for another set of your cucumbers, remove all of those flowers, take them off, let the plant just put on tons of foliage growth, and at the end of the season, compare which one grew better. Ultimately, you're going to get a really great learning for this and be able to determine which approach you like the most. And that's why I love this experimental mindset and approach. And ultimately, this is why I love that experimental approach. It's through experimenting that I've taught myself everything that I know in the garden, and allows me to really deeply and really intimately get to know how to grow these plants super well. So my encouragement to you is to run a little experiment with removing some of the flowers on your plants versus not removing some of the flowers on your plants, plants and see what the difference looks like. Now, after we have removed those flowers and a lot of growth is going to come onto the plant in terms of foliage, step number 7 is to not prune your cucumbers. So what you're going to notice over the course of the coming weeks is that there's going to be the main stem of the cucumber plant that's growing nice and long like a vine. And then there's of course leaves that are growing off of it. And in the nodes between the leaves and the main stem are going to be new suckers that ultimately begin to grow. And these are effectively new main stems as well. They're going to grow as a stem would. They're going to grow just like the rest of the vine. They're going to put out leaves or foliage, and then ultimately they're going to put out flowers as well. Therefore, the more suckers that we have on the plant, the more foliage that we're going to get, the more sun that we're going to be able to absorb, and then as a result, the more flowers and cucumbers we'll get to harvest later on in the season. So I really encourage you to not do any pruning on your cucumber plant. Simply allow it to grow every which direction on your A-frame, develop into a huge canopy of foliage and leaves, and you're going to be rewarded with all kinds of beautiful cucumbers a little bit later on in the season. Now, our second last step here, step number 8, is watering. And when it comes to cucumbers, again, when we cut one open, it is like 90% water in there. It is one of the highest water content vegetables that we find in the garden. And so for it to be creating these cucumbers that are full of water, well, the plant then certainly needs to be absorbing tons of water from the soil. And so what I encourage you to do on this front is to water really heavily for your cucumber plants. And personally, I'd recommend setting up a DIY automatic irrigation system. I've got a whole video on this that I would really encourage you to check out. It might seem a little bit daunting at the very beginning, but believe me, trust me on this one. Once you get started on it, it's really easy to set up. And ultimately, it's not only going to save you literally hours every few days in the garden from hand watering, but it's also going to ensure that every different vegetable, flower, crop throughout your garden is getting the absolute perfect amount of water for each of the different crops that you're growing. I really encourage you to do so. Now, once you do have that DIY automatic irrigation system in place, all that I like to do is place a watering spike right at the base of the cucumber plants. And then I run it for 20 minutes every 2 days during the peak of the summertime at a fairly low pressure to ensure that all of the water is staying right in the root zone of where we've planted our cucumber plants. And they're going to absolutely love this big drink of water. Now, if setting up a DIY irrigation system isn't an option for you, then what you're going to want to do is to hand water your plants. And so for this, all that you need to do is grab your hose and walk up to the plants that you're watering, and then simply begin watering the soil in that area right where the plants are entering into the soil to ensure the water is getting into the root zone. And continue to do this until the water begins to pool at the base of each plant. Now, when that water starts to pool, you're going to stop watering that area and move on to another part of your garden and begin watering the next part of your garden. As you do that, the first area where the water was pooling is going to start getting absorbed into the soil. If you kept on watering that area once the water was pooling, it would just start running off to the sides. So now you're watering another area of the garden while the water is settling in. Go through your garden, watering each of the areas that you need to, and then come back to your cucumbers, and all of that pooling water will have been absorbed into the soil. And now you're going to do a second round of watering just like the first. You're going to continue to water right at the soil level until the water pools, and then move on to the next area. Doing this multiple rounds is going to help ensure that as much of that water as possible is actually working its way into the soil, which allows the plants to ultimately be getting a really nice and deep watering. So that's how you go about hand watering your plants. And with that now in place, these cucumbers are going to absolutely take off. And that brings us to our 9th and final step for today, which is to harvest early and harvest often. And so you might be thinking or wondering, when do I know that my cucumbers are ready to harvest? So remember, when there's a cucumber growing on the plant is thinking, I need to be putting as much energy as possible towards developing that fruit. However, if you harvest it off of that plant, well, then it doesn't need to be putting any more energy towards that one. It can now redirect its energy towards developing more foliage, more flowers, and more cucumbers. And so my encouragement to you on this front is to not be afraid of actually harvesting your cucumbers on the slightly earlier side, or in other words, don't leave them on the plant for a really, really long time. So once your cucumbers are kind of like the size of a pickle, I encourage you to actually harvest that off of the plant and begin to enjoy it. And by doing so, that's going to allow the plant to put more energy towards more foliage development, more flower development, and as a result, give you even more cucumbers over the course of the season. So harvesting early and harvesting often is ultimately going to allow you to get even more cucumbers off of your plant over the course of the season. Now you might be wondering, well, what do I do with all of these cucumbers that I am getting off of my plant? And one option would be, of course, to be enjoying them in salads or fresh. But if you do want to go down the path of actually pickling them, which is something that I love to do with my cucumbers, then I've got a whole video on how I go through one of my absolute favorite pickling recipes. It's a super, super easy recipe. You don't even need to boil them. You simply just pop them into your fridge and you can enjoy them straight from there. So I really encourage you to check out that video and to give that recipe a try, because I think you'll absolutely love it. So at this point, you have pretty much all of the information that you need to be growing cucumbers. The one question you might be wondering is, what's the variety that I've been growing in this video? And so for cucumbers that I enjoy just in the garden or in salads, nice and fresh, I like to go with the patio snacker variety. Really encourage you to give that one a try because it's really nice, really crisp and fresh. But if you're interested in going down the path of ultimately pickling your cucumbers, then I would encourage you to try out the Artist Gherkin. It stays a little bit smaller, perfect size for pickles, and has a really, really nice flesh to it on the inside that's great for pickling. So for me, every year I'm growing both of those varieties in my garden, and that's what you've been seeing in this video. So with that being said, you now have everything that you need in order to grow a beautiful crop of cucumbers this season. I know that if you follow the steps that I've kind of walked us through and outlined in this video, that you're gonna have absolutely tons of success with your cucumbers. So that's all for today. Get out there, go grow some cucumbers, get your hands dirty. I'll catch you on the next lesson. See you then.